The United States national debt is accumulating at a rate of roughly $5 billion every single day. We have now crossed the $39.7 trillion milestone. On July 15, 2026, the weight of that massive debt reached the floor of the House of Representatives, causing a public split in a bipartisan consensus that had held firm for decades. Representative Thomas Massie introduced a budget amendment proposing a complete cut to the $3.3 billion in annual military aid the United States sends to Israel. For half a century, the Foreign Military Financing Program, specifically the grants designated for the Israeli military, has operated as one of the most secure lines of spending in the federal budget. While the amendment failed to pass, the final tally was a shock. 103 Democrats voted for the cut, and another 10 voted present, meaning more than half of the party refused to protect the aid package. To understand why this alliance suddenly found itself on the chopping block, we have to look past the Middle East and examine America's domestic bank account. The federal balance sheet is carrying a heavy load. The national debt has climbed to 139% of the country's gross domestic product. This graph tracks CBO projections, showing the deficit curving sharply upward. Borrowed capital comes with a massive cost. Net interest payments are projected to exceed $1 trillion annually, surpassing the entire defense budget. Over the next decade, 66 cents of every new borrowed dollar simply pays existing interest. Fiscal conservatives argue the United States can no longer afford to subsidize foreign militaries, while it struggles to service its own obligations. The financial pressure from this domestic crisis is now generating enough political force to test international commitments that have stood for decades. But the Republicans looking to balance the budget were joined by a large faction of Democrats who supported the cut for different, policy-driven reasons. Progressive lawmakers aimed their frustration at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, citing its conduct in the war in Gaza and the resulting humanitarian crisis. Those members also criticized the Israeli government's failure to confront escalating violence from settlers in the West Bank. Looking across the ocean, economists are questioning how vital this $3.3 billion aid package is to a modern, wealthy state like Israel. This pie chart shows that U.S. aid still accounts for roughly 15% of Israel's total military spending. But Israel's economy has grown so much over the last decade that this same aid now accounts for just 0.5% of its total GDP. Because the money is no longer required for Israel's economic survival, the aid has transformed into a strategic transaction for Washington to maintain political leverage. A report from the Institute for National Security Studies notes that cutting the aid would create a difficult short-term squeeze on Israel's defense procurement. In the long term, however, Israel would likely respond by accelerating domestic blue and white defense manufacturing to fill the gap. By expanding its own production, Israel would eventually end its reliance on American supply chains and the oversight that comes with them. For the United States, saving the $3.3 billion would mean losing its primary tool for influencing Israeli military and diplomatic policy. Cutting this funding also threatens the broader architecture of the region. The peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan are politically linked to the continuation of U.S. military assistance to Israel. The Massie Amendment was rejected, but the vote signaled that as the debt clock ticks higher, American foreign policy is being forced into a much tighter alignment with domestic fiscal reality.